dreadful, fucking dreadful May.
It is.
I think it's like avoidable.
Yeah.
It just felt so silly the whole time. It's like I can't believe I have no house when I had no house.
Yeah.
And then when I had a house, like, I can't believe I'm living with child protection services. You know, it just made no sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, like nonsensical or avoidable. Yeah, one of them.
Basically by the current, the party of the current government, and we want to have a system back that is good for everyone, and this is not a way of earning money or making money, but a way to just offer houses to people who need it. Since the last WoonProtest, basically the situation has not very much changed, and it's still the same. For the expropriation of landlords who have a lot of houses and are only renting them to tenants to earn money basically, and not caring about the state of the houses or not caring about the situation of the tenants. We want to have all renting regulated, not only social housing but also houses that are rented for more money. We want to have a cap on all the raises on the rents, because the rents are raised every year, and the problem is that it's coupled to the inflation, and the problem is that it's now getting more and more expensive to rent a house without any demands coupled to the quality of the house or the quality of the room you're living in. So basically we want to go back to a system where renting is regulated, where it's offered to basically everyone and not anymore seen as a way of making money.
Do I look too happy for the housing crisis? Okay, so
today is Sunday, 22nd of October. It is currently 2:32 p.m. and action.
I thought you were going to say, and I'm currently being held hostage.
That too. Should I talk to you or the camera? Okay. My name is Aurélie. I'm currently 22 years old. I am originally from Germany. I've traveled a bunch of places from the US to Greece, so home is a bit difficult to pinpoint. And I study at the UvA in the program of psychology.
My name is Aurélie. I'm 21 years old and I'm from Luxembourg and I study at the University of Amsterdam.
So I'm Eveliina, I'm almost 23. I'm from Finland and I used to study at UvA.
My name is Alec. I am South African and I am 19 years old and I study at the University of Amsterdam in Amsterdam.
My name is Renzy, I'm 19, I'm American, and I study at the UvA.
So I'm Sebastian, albino, I am 23, I'm Peruvian, and I'm currently studying at the University of Amsterdam.
My name is Coffee, I'm 20 years old, I study at the University of Amsterdam, and I'm English.
So my name is Andreas, I am Dutch. I was born and raised in Holland, so I'm Dutch. I am 21 years old, I'm a political science student and I do a minor in urban planning, might be important. Where do I study? Oh, I study at the University of Amsterdam.
I'm Jasmijn, I'm from the Netherlands, so I'm a Dutchie. And I'm 20 years old and I study at the University of Amsterdam.
Oh, hi, I'm Boer. I'm 21 years old. I study at the University of Amsterdam where I do political science. I'm a Dutch student living here in Amsterdam. And next to my study, I am an advocate for student housing.
I'm Isabella. I'm the chair of ASVA for year 2023 and 2024. My job is to advocate for our students, media, and everybody else who wants to know what should be done for students.
What motivated you to come to study in Amsterdam?
Oh, quite a bit. I was born in the Netherlands, but I am still South African fully. I spoke a bit of Dutch before I came as well, so I felt like since he was coming home a bit. Amsterdam specifically, the cultural diversity, how liberal it is in regards to the LGBTQ community. For me, coming out when I moved here was quite a big thing. I knew I wanted to study sociology. That's quite highly ranked. I think last year it made 7th in the world, sociology at UVA. So I thought it was a really good place to come study for sociology.
The university saying yes to me when I applied for psychology. Other than that, I had not really any other pathways set out for me. So I took the chance and I moved.
So before I was living in Peru, in Lima, to be exact, and I moved directly here without not a lot of knowledge regarding the Netherlands. It was mostly the high level of education that the university was offering and comparison to the tuition in comparison to the United States, the UK, Canada as being one of the cheapest options that I had and my best chance for the best education I can get, because in Peru even the best universities will not give you or help you to get a job outside of Peru, and I wanted a possibility for me and my future family. That's the case.
Well, as a Dutchie in living like in Utrecht, near Utrecht, it was for me like the difference between do you want to go to Utrecht or Amsterdam, and just the travel, the tourists, the whole city, it just like pulled me like a magnet instead of Utrecht. I had a lot of doubts going to Amsterdam or Utrecht, and then one day it snapped in my head like I had to go to Amsterdam. I don't know, it feels better. I don't know, there was just a feeling in my stomach, and for me it speaks to me more than the feeling I had to go to Amsterdam.
Were you aware of the housing crisis prior to applying to the university?
Yes, I was.
No.
No. No.
Were you aware of the housing crisis prior to applying?
I had like no idea, and additionally, I got super lucky when I first moved here because I had no idea about the housing, and there were like student housing things like Duo, not like duo where you lend money from, but like duo where you live at, and like duo or like the key and like those ones like that, and like there was like a lottery for it essentially for like duo housing, and so then like because it was happening at like in the morning here, so like my mom would like stay up late and then just like got on the page and entered the lottery, and then we got a spot, and we were like, oh, that's cool, and then I like forgot about it, but like looking back now, like the fact that I was able to show up here and I already had a house secured for me, it wasn't a very good house, you know what I mean? It was some first year student housing, but it that I had no idea how lucky I was until then. After that came up, after my first year was done, then I had to actually look for a house, and then the ridiculousness of the fact that I'd already been here for a year and still couldn't find a house made me just think how lucky I was that like I was able to come here at first and I already had one. Because if I was showing up here and I had didn't know anybody, it literally would have been impossible. Yeah.
Yes, quite fully aware. More aware in regards to that finding a place would be very hard. Obviously, once actually having lived here, you recognize or get to know all the other dimensions of the housing crisis, because when you move, you just hear that it's difficult, you know, so you start stressing a year before in advance if you're lucky to know that you want to move to Amsterdam. So obviously you try networking, you try signing up for student housing, all those things, but some places require you to sign up like years before, which I find quite difficult considering you don't know where and what you want to study, 2 years before you finish high school. So yeah, aware of some of the struggles.
I did notice to an extent because of my sisters, but I didn't realise how bad it was with applying. I was also late to applying to some of the deadlines, so I thought it would be a little bit harder for me to get it through the UvA, but I didn't realise that it was going to be that hard.
Yes, and I hate it because everyone is like, I might get my own place and my own room, and I tried to find something, but I wasn't that clever girl who turned 16 and write in at room.nl or studentwoning.nl or something like that. So I wasn't on the waiting list for 2 years already because I didn't know where I wanted to study. So if I did that, maybe I lived in Amsterdam now because I would already have been on the waiting list for 2 years. But I didn't, and the prices are insane. So like I don't have an older sister or brother who could have told me, and I'm the first in my family who is like going to the university. So nobody has told me that that's even an option, and I didn't look for it on the internet. So I didn't know that you could do that before I was like 1 month before I was going to study.
Did the crisis influence your decision to study in Amsterdam?
It did for a while because it made me realize the poor options that you're gonna get and how difficult it's gonna be. I consider myself being one of the lucky ones that got a housing with registration, a housing that the landlords have a good communication with them. I know this is nearly never the chance. Even though I don't live like in the inner ring, I live in an alright area where I feel sometimes safe, but more safe than where I come from, to just leave. But this made me reconsider if I should continue my studies here or I should just drop them in a point, because I was like I had to see what other options I have, live in Utrecht, or because I as well go 2 years to Utrecht, or go to live in Haarlem. Many people live in Almere, but they have to commute an hour to just come here one way. And I was thinking, is that even worth it? Because that's not how it's supposed to be to live in a city. I was put in a weird situation when I arrived. COVID hit, because I arrived to this country in 2019, and during that time, my student housing contract got extended for another year, so that helped me a lot. But I know this is not what usually happens. Sometimes people only have contracts 6 months, and then you have to get a place. And I think that's horrible.
March 2021 is when I heard saying like, hey, the program will be online fully for this year. So then I decided to stay in my village for a year, studying remotely. And then I think then is when I started realizing, oh, I'm gonna be moving to Amsterdam. I should start looking. And then I realized actually how bad the situation, well, I slowly started realizing how bad the situation was getting. And that led to some thoughts about like, oh crap, what will I do if I don't find something? But I was still quite optimistic. So yeah.
Before or?
Yeah, before you moved, did it influence your decision?
Yeah, I think it did because when I was deciding to move, I got a place in a hostel, but it was emergency housing. So I was really unsure if I was going to be able to actually stay in Amsterdam. So when I arrived, it was really sort of a day-to-day, like to see how it goes, sort of, basis. So I wasn't really sure if I was going to be able to like completely stay.
No, because I knew it was 1 hour travel time, and to Utrecht is almost the same, maybe a bit shorter. So I knew it beforehand, and I was like, I want to study here, so I take that for granted that I have to start for 1 hour.
Where are we going to?
Why are you upset, Yasmin?
Because I don't have like this thing for you to sit on, and now that's my ugly mom bike. What's this? Looking around.
What kind of assistance did the university offer in regards to housing?
I think there was student housing, but I never even applied to that. So, not much.
For the first year, I got a accommodation through the university, but then after that, the university didn't help.
So for me specifically, because I come from a bit of a different background, because I took a 2-year gap year, I have roots in my village, I have a dog, who you can maybe hear in the background. For him, the university didn't really offer any accommodation. Everything was either for students who are just fresh from their parents. It was much more like the university took a bit of a parental role in helping with housing, but ultimately they don't have enough housing for first year students of any program actually.
For me, because I grew up in Rotterdam, which is just outside, no, it's just close enough, because the university has like a sort of rule that like if you live more than I think an hour, 2 hours away from university, then they will help you find housing. But I live just within those borders, so they wouldn't help, and that was kind of shit.
What are your thoughts on the housing crisis here in Amsterdam?
My thoughts. I mean, as a student, especially for students, if you come from like somewhere else, and you don't know about the crisis beforehand, then it's quite difficult to like move to the country and then realize that you don't have a place to stay and that there's not really any help that will get you a place. So I think it's I don't really know what to like how to think about it, but it's something that should be dealt with, but it doesn't seem like it is. It seems like it's kind of ignored, kind of thing, but it's very much happening and very serious.
Well, I feel like I'll give a bit of my perspective and my standpoint as an international student. International students, there are certain accommodations such as the social hub, where it's specifically for international students, but we do pay institutional fees, which is near, I think, 6 to 7 times the price of European students. So we oftentimes do come from families that can afford university fees that are 6-7 times the price. So looking for housing, we are in a budget that we could oftentimes just make the private market. Classic, they then allow bidding on rental prices, which I found, and it's blind bidding, so you don't know how much you're offering. So you see the rental prices, for example, 2,000 euros per month, and you know that there's a lot of people, so you bid 2.3 or 2.4. And I often find that's very common amongst international students, is what you're required to do. Also, compared to international students, compared to European students, sometimes they ask an extra monthly deposit because they're uncertain about the location of income from your parents, especially if it's a third world country. So yeah, the international students do have definitely their own unique experiences in regards to the housing crisis, but I think a big part of it as well has to do with UVA. UVA, the entry requirements are not that high amongst many of the European universities, considering its prestigiousness. So we are accepting thousands of students every year that is required to have housing, but there isn't housing, and then but UVA is also one of the highest dropout rates amongst a lot of universities in Europe.
What are your honest thoughts on the housing crisis here in Amsterdam?
My honest thoughts on it? I mean, there's not really many thoughts to be had about it. Like, it just is. You know what I mean? Like, and you gotta navigate it, and you gotta hopefully get a house. Like, you can. I'm sort of just constantly mildly pissed off about it, and I think I'm not. And then I'll hear someone stir about how they got a house really easy, or like some other thing, and then I realize, oh, you're super bitter in a certain sense. But my thoughts, I mean, it's hard to get a house, and you gotta be good to be lucky. So hopefully you get one, and it's hard.
So, can you provide an overview of the current student housing crisis in your region or city?
So right now here in Amsterdam, we have a shortage of about, I think, 6,000 houses, which is expected to grow to about 16,000 by 2030, 2031. Over the last few years, we've seen prices really grow through the roof, especially in the private sector. We see more and more students falling out of their studies because they can't find a house.
What are the primary factors contributing to the shortage of student housing in your area?
So I think there are quite a lot of factors that contribute to the housing shortage here in Amsterdam, but I think the biggest cause is definitely the liberalization of the housing market. So in the 90s we stopped investing in social housing, we dismissed the Ministry of Housing in the Netherlands, and since then we really see that things have gone bad for everyone. I feel like in Amsterdam for students things are particularly worse. This has multiple causes. First of all, Amsterdam has become a really popular city over the last 20 years. Next to that, secondly, we see that the universities have also tremendously grown. They've been attracting a lot of students, especially international students. The University of Amsterdam has grown with, I think, about 10,000 students over the last 7 years. And we see that the municipality is really cracking down on house sharing and stuff like that, which hurts students extra bad.
What impact does the lack of affordable and adequate housing have on students in your area?
So I think the impact is quite broad. So first of all, in the worst case, you have students, especially from abroad, that simply cannot start their studies here because of the housing shortage, which means that they often have to wait another year to be able to study somewhere else. But for students that are maybe Dutch or do find a house, it's often quite bad for their mental well-being. On the one hand, they, for instance, have to work more, which means that they can spend less time going out or having fun with their students, which is also a very important part of your student life. Or usually they have to live very far away, have to travel very far. which means that they can't go to a bubble or can't go to a party, and they miss that interaction with their students. So you see that like it also somewhat tears on the social fabric in the university. And lastly, students also garner a lot more debt, which has bad consequence for their future. They have to pay them off those student loans.
Could you share some statistics or data that highlight the extent of the student housing problem in your region?
Oh, I gotta pull those up. Sorry.
Yeah.
I know where to find them, but
No worries, take your time,
so yeah, in terms of numbers, what we've seen is over the last, I think, 5 to 6 years, prices have raised by at least 20%, going from an average of 460 euros to an average of 600 euros here in Amsterdam. Next to that, you see that there are 6,000 houses that are needed for students, and that shortage is expected to grow to 16,000 in the region of Amsterdam. So we're already quite in a deep crisis, and it's only getting deeper.
What was your experience finding housing for your second year?
Very, very hard, because I didn't have a house. So my student housing my first year went up, and I had no idea how tricky it was. I did actually start to realize how tricky it was, but I was really disorganized and wasn't focusing on it, and had a bunch of other shit going on. And so, like, my rent, like my lease just went up on the 13th of August, and then after that, I just was on people's couches for like all of September, and into like almost to the end of October. There was no house, so I was just like had a bunch of good friends who just offered me their places for a couple nights, and there were some times where I didn't know where I was going to be staying that night, and so I would just be like, I was planning to like sleep in the boardroom. I was like thinking about where I would hide in the shit, because I was like, well, I gotta stay there because there's nowhere. And then like I eventually would be like, someone would text me back and be like, yeah, you can stay here. So then I would like go to that place. And then at one point my parents sent me a little bit extra money, so then I got a hostel room for like a week. I think I was on couch for like maybe a week more after that, and then I got my place in Far West. That was really good to have, but then it was like with like child protective services, so like one of the roommates was like, you know, they all had a lot of trauma, and so that meant a lot of different things. And also like they had the people coming in and checking up on those kids like every day, so there was always like random people entering your house and like making sure, you know, no drugs or no anything. And like one of the guys, he like attacked me one time because I didn't give him the TV remote. So that house was a little tricky, but I was still really glad that I had it. It's still better than having no house. But second year was pretty hard, housing-wise. And then that house kept going for a little while, but then the way that I got that house, which was like through my friend, and she had all the relationship with the landlord, and also they didn't really speak much English, and so she was also Moroccan, and like they were Dutch Moroccan, so their Arabic isn't so good, but they can still speak. But then once she had gone and she wasn't able to like mediate, then it was just me trying to talk to these guys, and their English wasn't so good, and my Dutch wasn't good enough. So it was kind of hard to talk to them and deal with everything, and there was no contract, so it was all in cash, so it was illegal. They were just good guys who were trying to take care of these kids, but like they were tough guys who were taking care of these kids because the kids were in all kinds of bad ways. It was a little sketchy there for a while, and then once my roommate was gone, they were kind of like, well, what are you still doing living here? You know what I mean? Because like they only were giving her a house because of their relationship with the mom. And then once she was gone, then it's like, well, now we just got this kid who's just still living in this place, and you gotta get out of here. So they were like, you got like 2 weeks more at this house, and then you gotta go. But they didn't put me out on the street. They moved me to another house that they had because it was like, you know, child protective services. So they have a couple different houses. So they moved me to this other house, and I stayed there for maybe 2 weeks or so. And then after that, I got out of that system, and a friend of mine had a room open in Nord, and then I moved to Nord for about a month. And then after that month, then I got this place. Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
I still can't believe that I live here. And I'll make like wrong turns on my way back all the time because I like think I live further west than I do. And then I'm like, wow, I live here now.
So at the beginning I got emergency housing through the ASVA, which I think I got about 2 weeks before I was, no actually yeah, 2 months before I was moving to Amsterdam. And yeah, I was living in the hostel for about a month, but I was prepared to live there for longer, and I shared a room with these 2 other girls. And yeah, and then afterwards I was still applying for places, and luckily I found a studio through a lottery, which is this one. So after I think 4 weeks of living in the hostel, I was able to move out, and so far I've been here ever since. But yeah, the lottery was also I think about like 150 people, so I was really lucky to get somewhere. But that was also a hard process because going from a hostel to a studio in different parts of the city and moving within like 4 weeks of already moving to a new city and like settling in was a bit hard, so I think that didn't help with so the housing situation just didn't help with that at all.
Well, my first year I was still living with my parents in, actually at the time I wasn't living in Rotterdam, I was living in a tiny village, but like it was the same like distance as Rotterdam is, so it didn't really matter. So I lived with my parents the first year. For the first half of the second year I also still lived with them, and then I moved to Amsterdam in December 2022. No, 21. Yeah, second year. I'm now 4th year, by the way. Yes, 21. December 21. And I lived in Amsterdam for like 3 months, and then due to some issues with my landlord, I had to move out, and I couldn't find a place, so I had to go back to my parents, where I again stayed for a year, and then moved to Amsterdam again. And I was again forced to leave after half a year, and now I just in time got a new apartment, which is where we are now. So and I have to leave here at the end of January.
Why did you have to leave those 2 times?
Well, the first time my landlord, he subletted the apartment, so I also did not have registration. He was kind of insane. And my neighbors were insane as well. So like he had like an online tanning spray shop. Yes, and it was very vague, and like all of his tanning spray stuff was like in our attic. But like actually no, he didn't have all that stuff, right? And he ordered everything, and just before it arrived, he went to Claudia on a holiday, and he was like, hey, can you move some stuff that will come here in like a week or two. Can you move that to the attic? And I was like, yeah, sure, no worries. And then it was, I think, like 30 boxes of like tanning spray. And it's heavy stuff. And like me as an asthmatic person with like zero actual muscle power, I had to carry like 30 boxes, like completely filled with this stuff to the attic. And I was like, hey, I didn't know that it was this much or this heavy, so I wouldn't have said yes. Do you maybe have a friend of yours who at least could help me? And then we had an entire fight. He threatened to kick us out, but in the end he actually sent a friend of his who helped, and we took everything upstairs. And we had a downstairs neighbor, and if you made any noise, like even if you would walk around through the apartment after 10, our downstairs neighbor would hear it, and he would get like mad and start, I think he had like a broom or something, and he was banging against his ceiling, so our floor, and like the entire apartment was shaking. So I sort of got scared to walk after 10. It was kind of shit. The second apartment was, I joined a group contract. So 4 people together had a contract, and one of these people, she left the apartment because she found another place, and I took her place. So a new contract, and that was for half a year. And I lived there for half a year. And when I signed the contract, the agency told me, yeah, you can renew it after the contract ends for another year. It's completely fine. And they repeated that same thing, I think, like 3 times. And then like 3 or 2 months before we actually, before our contract would end, we asked like, hey, how do we renew our contract and everything? And they said, oh yeah, no, we're taking this apartment out of our rental properties because we are repurposing it to a assisted living complex for elderly people who can't live alone. Yeah, so we had to move out.
So in the first year, I got my accommodation around July, before starting the year, like during the summer, and it was quite last minute that I got it. It was through an email that the university had sent about finding accommodation for the first year, and they sent a link where you could fill out your preferences of like if you wanted a private room, so you wouldn't have to share anything. So you'd have like a little studio, like you'd have your own kitchen and your own bathroom, your own bedroom, everything. And then there was like another one that I chose that was where you could share the kitchen, but have a private bedroom and bathroom. And so I picked that one, and then you could pick the range of prices that you would want to pay for. And mine was the most in the middle. It was around 500 to 700 euros, I think, something like that. If you were able to get a room, they would send you another link, and you could choose a building, and you could choose like your own room. And for me, there was only one more building that was available with 3 rooms, and so yeah, I could pick the room that I wanted in on the floor that I wanted, and in the corridor that I wanted, and that's how I got my room. For the second year, it was way more difficult than the first year. I started to look for a house with 2 other people so that we would share, the 3 of us. And we started this whole searching thing in April of 2022. 2022. And it went on for a while, and we would look on, I don't know, loads of different housing websites, stuff like that. But then we had a few viewings and nothing. It never actually went anywhere because the difficult part was that the people, like the landlords, and they didn't want to have any students living there, or they didn't, or they didn't want to have more than 2 people sharing.
Mhm.
So it was very difficult because there was all of these rules that made it difficult for like us as students to get a place. And so then eventually we abandoned the idea of doing it 3 of us because it seemed really impossible, and it was already summertime, so we had to really get a room for September. And so then I applied. I still tried to look for something everywhere, but then nothing ever worked. And then in September I applied for a house that, like, it's a lottery system where you get a studio, and I applied for that one, not thinking that I was gonna get it, but then I eventually got it, and so I had my room in October, so I didn't have a place basically for the whole of September.
Mhm.
Before that. Yeah. Like, I also was thinking of, if I don't find something, then I can't continue studying here because I can't live in a hostel or like in people's houses for the whole year and expect to like do great at uni at the same time, because you can't really balance the two. So yeah, so I think the most it was pretty stressful.
Alright, so in my case, it's a bit of an oddball because my first year I didn't have to find a new housing due to COVID. On my second year, I found this accommodation with dual, and what happened is that while I was living there, it was around the Pride parade, and just after, and people hang out some pride flags on the hallway, and then somebody came and set them on fire. And then around mid-August, somebody had enough, put a lot of flags on their door, and then somebody basically grabbed some lightning fuel and set that on fire. And then eventually the fire spread out through the whole hallway, and the place did not have even like fire alarms in the hallways, only on the rooms. And the 8th floor was completely on fire, and I was living on the 9th floor, and I got alarmed about this because somebody was ringing on my door saying somebody said fire, and then I was thinking of ignoring it, thinking it's something, some people drunk or anything, but then I hear people going through the fire exit, and then I tell my roommate at the time, hey, I think something's on fire, we should get out. And damn right I was right. And we got out of it. I did not take anything. I only had to take my keys, and I did not even lock my door. We go through the fire exit at around 6 a.m. where we saw one of the rooms completely like being on fire, and people had to like get through the window to get them out. It was the firefighters. The people were nearly suffocating because of the fire. Through the process of that, somebody entered to the apartments and stole stuff. And they stole my wallet with my laptop that I just bought like 2 months prior. And after that, I could not sleep properly in that place because I just heard every time that somebody was in the hallway. I thought somebody would come back and steal something from me because I just couldn't. Then I just decided to move out, and this was not a good moment to move out because it was November, around where it's still kind of really rough to find a place. So then I moved to this place with no registration for around 3-4 months, where I couldn't even use the living room, where it was a couple, it was old, they were like 60, 70, and they were nice, you know. They're nicer because I speak the language, but I didn't have registration, I couldn't use the living room. I was basically put on hold and living in my room, and I think that kind of made me quite sad, especially after going through that. And I tried to do my best because I was still living in a nice area and I was paying an alright amount of rent. It's just that I was put in this situation because of what happened in that building. And from that point, I was just on the first thing I did since I moved there is just look and look and look. And then I made me realize that the housing market is nearly impossible. I had to look for 4 months straight every single day to just find a place where it could be. And the place I currently have, which is this one, the moment they put in the ad, they got around 70 responses on one day. And less than, I think, 3-4 hours they put the ad, they had to put it down, and they only contacted the first 7-8 people that they got a response, and I was luckily one of those people. And on top of that, they had to do the elimination process, and somehow I as well got on top of it, which was really, really fortunate. And I think it's like finding a needle in a pile of haze.
Let's see if I can sell it for 15.
Is the housing you currently have the housing you've had since your first year?
Yeah, I just switched rooms.
Would you say you have any unique experiences with?
Well, there was an incident with the roommate who stole me and my other roommate's money for 2 months. So I feel like that's a unique experience. And also fighting with the landlord, that's also been fun.
So I started my studies in August 2020. I moved to Amsterdam August 2021. And yeah, so I first got a hotel for 2 weeks because I was like, oh yeah, I haven't been having luck finding things really online and remotely, so I'll just live there for 2 weeks. I had a nice little hotel in the Museumskwartier, so it was nearby Rijks, which was really nice.
Mm-hmm.
My brother came to visit at some point. Buddy was also staying with me for 2 weeks. Unfortunately, didn't find anything, even though I spent day and night on Commernet, Facebook Marketplace. Don't use Facebook Marketplace. Scammers are there. And everything. It wasn't working. Every offer I did get and saw, it was like, sign right now, otherwise you're not getting it. And I was always just sketchy about that. So then I went back home to Germany, and the classes were starting soon. And I was like, oh shit, I need something. So then I get an Airbnb for a month over in Oost. Nearby campus, I could walk to campus, Wilters Island, in 7 minutes, which was nice. So then it was me and Buddy in like a Airbnb in a room with 2 lovely Spanish hosts, because their roommate was out of town for a bit. It was really nice, honestly. But for me it was weird because I never lived with roommates, let alone from like living with your landlord. I spent a month with classes starting, first time studying university, in person. So I was getting used to in-person lectures again versus having the convenience last year of everything online. Only time there was really a deadline with either with assignments or like in-person tutorials on Zoom. So then being like, oh, I need to make sure I go to this lecture because it's not recorded anymore. So I was first adjusting to Amsterdam without having really permanent housing. So I couldn't do any of the first steps that normal people do, such as BSN, possibly looking for work, etc. And then just my life revolved around finding housing. The end of the month was coming up, couldn't find anything, so I extended my Airbnb contract. Again, Airbnb is expensive as fuck. So I was out of a lot of money already within the first 2 months of living in Amsterdam, because I spent the previous 2 years of my gap year actually just saving up money for Amsterdam. Then I found out about this deal at the Generator Hostel in Oosterpark, also nearby campus, where because of COVID they had to have their occupation, but they also offered student accommodation. So like you would get a bit of a reduced monthly rate, you could rent per month. And if you paid for 2 people, you get your own room. So with Buddy, I was like, I'll pay the 2-person room so that we have our own private room. So I spent, up until October, I was in the generator hostel. It was quite nice. Most of my belongings were in the storage unit over by the Belmer, and then everything I needed on day-to-day life was in my tiny hostel room with 4 beds, 1 bathroom, and no storage whatsoever. Other than that, under the bread drawers was it. Then comes the end of October, still no housing, until I get word that this place in Haarlem opened up. It was a studio room, great location, but you would walk in through a tiny hallway, you would be greeted by a little living room and a kitchen, and then 7 doors. 7 different households lived in this theater, and one of the doors was mine and Buddy's. It was me, Buddy, and then 7 people sharing the common areas. Washing machine broke, landlord didn't fix it. Normal struggles you have here. But before I got that place, I actually couldn't extend my housing anywhere in the city because it was Halloween weekend, and for some reason during COVID, every single hotel was booked. My contract at Generated would end on like the 29th, and the 30th and 31st I needed a place to stay because on the 1st I could move in. Luckily I could already bring most of my stuff there. We had a park meetup and I had a friend there, and she offered very graciously for me to crash on her couch with Buddy for 2 nights. It wasn't the most luxurious part, but it was. I'm always eternally grateful that I got to crash there. And then I moved to Haarlem. I lived there for 9 months, had my stresses of commuting, finding work. Always the stress of be like, oh yeah, technically you can't register here. I registered. Things like that. Overpaying for whatever you get, no matter what. Issues with old buildings. But yeah, in March 2022, my contract was ending. I was desperate, so I paid the retailer a buttload of money, and I paid also my landlord a buttload of money, and I got a contract for 1 year. And I lived happily ever after in Amsterdam West for a year, and then my contract ended, and it did not get renewed because I was told that the apartment had to be completely renovated. There's no point in getting a new contract because it's gonna take forever. Then I hear a month later, oh, you're still registered at this address. A new lady's moving in today. Could you please deregister? I'm like, I thought you were gonna spend 6 months renovating and getting the apartment. And she's like, no, things went better faster. So yeah, she basically just spruced things up, new furniture, and then doubled the rent. So, I mean, game recognizes game. Okay. And now I paid the same retailers a boatload of money to find this place. I pay more in rent actually now for not prime location, but in Haarlem it's quite nice.
I extended my stay for a 2nd semester at the social hub. So that meant that I had housing right until June 30th, the exact date that my first year of university also finished, which also is a problem in itself. There are a lot of people then wanting to find housing for July 1st or June 30th. With this place that we found very last minute, within the last week of June, we were set to move in for July 1st, but we got a message on June 30th, June 29th, saying that the current tenants need a few extra days to move out, which put all of us in a tricky situation because we had nowhere to live for those few days. So I booked a hotel room. It's all I could find for those last panic 3 days. The quite literal last hotel room in TSH, I remember. And yeah, so I feel like having hundreds of contracts around the whole city end on June 30th and July 1st, where everybody has to move in and move out, it also creates a lot of pressure. I had at the time been looking with, I think, 3 different realtors. Unless they find something, you actually pay them. So you can have a realtor look for you and then bring you options which you don't pay for at all, only until they actually rent the place, then you pay 1 month's deposit. So I had looked for all the student realtors. So I had multiple applications going, also with friends, and the ties with friends and promises with friends here that if you find something, I promise I'll find you, blah blah. So it's a bit of a tricky, messy situation sometimes. Obviously, I think that a few people down that I was looking with as well when I found a place, because how I found the place was my flatmate had found it and said that the landlord had said registration possible for 2 people, but luckily one of our flatmates is half Dutch, so he is registered at somewhere else in the Netherlands. So everybody is still technically kind of legal. Registration for me was very important as a non-European student. I didn't want to jeopardize anything with my visas or residence permits or anything of that sort.
The problem is not actually only for the tenants, the problem is also that there are lots of homeless people, and that there is now 100,000 homeless people living in the Netherlands, not having a house, not having a home of their own, and at the same time you have lots and lots of houses that are empty because they're used for speculation. So that is one of the main reasons for us also to organize protests and not to give up in protesting. I think we have to relearn the basics of solidarity and care about problems that not necessarily have to do with our own situation, but see that the housing crisis is a problem in society. If part of the society has to do with the housing crisis, that is a problem for all society and not only for a few people. People can support us by demonstrating, by showing that they care about the movement, that they care about themselves and others, and just join the movement, demonstrate with us, be there when we need each other, and please continue to make sure that the housing crisis is still a topic we are talking about.
Can you provide an overview of ASVA's mission and the main objectives it aims to achieve on behalf of Amsterdam students?
Well, first of all, we want that life for students get better in Amsterdam, and that includes better housing, more housing, payable housing.
What inspired the formation of ASVA, and how has the organization evolved over the years?
Well, the organization started in 1945, just after World War II, and a lot of people were an activist in World War II. Students, they started ASVA, and in the beginning we were more like a union, so everybody was a member of ASVA who was a student, because we provided food that was like very cheap, and later those initiatives became like the CAP pass, which is like a thing for everybody in the Netherlands. If you are young, you get discount on a lot of stuff, musea, festivals. We are also an organization for HBO and MBO students, and in the beginning we were not. So this is something we evolved in over the years.
So you know how there's a lot of like challenges when like people are trying to find housing. Could you maybe go into some of the details of like scams or other sort of things that students encounter when seeking out housing?
Sometimes people walk in here and they are like, yeah, I got a contract, but the amount I have to pay beforehand is like so much bigger than is legal, because you can only like ask 2 times of the normal rents as at the beginning. But it's just, you cannot say like, oh, I don't want to pay that, because there are like other people who would want to do that and also want a house. So then people just are like in this position where they know their rights, but they can't then counter them because they have no other options, or they don't even know them, and they just need to pay a lot, or they a lot more than their house is worth, or they before they even get a house they encounter a lot of discrimination, because a lot of housing in Amsterdam is just people only want people who speak Dutch or women, or like a bit older than most students who begin studying, or just people who thought they had housing and then just came to the Netherlands and they were like, oh, the house I thought I was gonna rent doesn't exist.
What are the most impactful campaigns and initiatives that ASVA has undertaken to improve student housing conditions in the city?
Well, we had an agreement with the municipality in which we described like certain goals for students and other kind of stuff that would better the housing for students, but they closed agreements last year because they were like, we don't want to pinpoint a certain amount of housing because it's not fair to the other groups of people who need housing, and it's like a bullshit reason because you can also like pinpoint the other groups, because right now you don't even have like a point in the horizon that you want to work to, so how are you even gonna decide on housing?
How does ASVA collaborate with local authorities, universities and other stakeholders to advocate for student housing rights and improvement?
Well, we work together with the people who are like in charge of the university and the ASVA. We also work together with a lot of other unions, which are like under the ASVA, which is like the union for the Netherlands, and there we advocate, and they advocate in Den Haag for student housing for the whole country. Yeah, we talk with the I don't know the word anymore.
Municipality?
Yes, thank you. Municipality. And also with other housing corporations in Amsterdam, so Duo and Eveliina.
In your opinion, what is the most important message or takeaway that you hope viewers of this documentary will gain about ASVA's work and the student housing situation in Amsterdam?
Yeah, I hope people know that their voices matter, that their experiences with the housing crisis matter, and that they are not alone, and that there are people who want to help them, who can help them, that there are solutions to problems. Just don't be quiet, because sometimes politicians just need a little bit of direction in the how problems could be solved.
How did it make you feel not knowing whether you would find housing?
A bit hopeless. And that is something that is really scary, to lose hope. That you are gonna get to a point that you have to rely on friends. And that in a point your luck is gonna run out.
God, it was stressful. It was nerve-wracking. the underlying stress of not knowing whether you'll have a roof over your head or you can continue your studies, or you might live in, I don't know, absolutely terrible conditions, or you're going to have to suddenly start paying, I don't know, 10, 15 euros a day because you need to live in a different city just to get to your university that you study at. Terrible. It's because it really is. It's an every single day that you don't find something. It's like a ticking time bomb. You know, it's no, really, it really gets on your nerves. Not knowing you can find a place. Also, you're constantly having to dodge scammers, just people being completely rude, getting denied for the most smallest niche little incidences, or being like, oh, last minute the person renting out the flat decided to stay in Amsterdam. So you're following 100 different leads at the same time, knowing that about 75% is not going to work out. You have hopes for the other 20, but you know that it's most likely gonna, I don't know, fall through as well. Then 5% just never end up responding as well. So yeah, it really is. It's stressful. It is quite stressful.
How did the housing shortage affect your academic or personal life?
Well, if there was no housing shortage, I would probably have moved out I think 2 years earlier than I actually did. Because those 2 years I was looking for a place. But I thought I had kind of maybe too high standards, and that's fair. And after that, like this past year, it's stressing every half year. Like after half a year, I have to find a new place again. So I'm now already looking for a new place in like 3 months. So if you know anything, let me know.
Both suffered. Because, you know, if you have no house, you have a shit house, it's like no one wants to come over. You know what I mean? It's like you never like, it's very lonely if you have a bad house or if you have no house, because like, you know, you never get to, you know, chill with anybody really. So like either you're just on campus the whole time or you're at somebody else's place, but a lot of the time you just like spend alone. Which if you're cool with that, then you're cool with that. But I remember that being kind of hard in a lot of ways. And academically it's hard because like, you know, maybe you don't study on campus so well. Then you can't, that's the only place you can study because, or like at a cafe or something, but if you have no money you can't be like paying, you know, $3 for a coffee every time you want to study. It adds up pretty fast if you're pretty broke. And also just like, when I had no house, that was extremely tough because aside from having to do all your schoolwork and you got essays to do a lot, you have to like move your stuff, like everything you have around all the time. And like, if you don't have a house, you're like, you can't really do your housework or your homework like in like other people's places. Because also like, when you have no house, you kind of learn the etiquette for how to stay in other people's houses. Mm-hmm. You spend as little time there as possible because then they'll get sick of you because no one really wants somebody sleeping on their couch. And so it's very like, yeah, you just can't spend any time there. And so having no place where you can stay solid and work on your stuff that you have to do, with your readings and all that, that makes it really tricky. So academically you can't stay focused because there's no place for you to be calm because there's no place to rest. That's what it felt like. It was like you can't rest. So if you can't rest, then you can't be social, you can't be academic.
Have you experienced any discrimination or unfair treatment in the housing crisis?
Yes, mainly that it seems like people don't trust you when you're a student. Even if I went through the financial checks, like I would send them very invasive screenshots of my personal finances, about how much money I have liquid, how much money is set in assets, things like that. Like even just like, they would ask the most invasive questions about my finances, and then I'd be like, oh yeah, I can't work, they'd ask me for like my work contract and be like, why is it 20 hours, why is it only 30 hours? I'm like, because I'm also a student, and the second you say the evil S word, you get rejected.
I don't think so. I I don't think. I feel like for the first year, which really surprises me, is that people who, mainly internationals that I've spoken to, who applied for a room in the first year, it took them way too long, or like way longer, or it even like didn't happen for them to get a room. When I did it last minute, and I got it within a week.
Weirdly enough, yes. Because you would think that the fact that I am a Dutch white male, it would be easier. But the fact that I'm a man actually makes it harder. Because there's a lot of apartments that are mostly women, or people that are only looking for women. Also dudes that are only accepting women. It's insane. It's absolutely insane.
I think the biggest challenge should be the proper ethnicity, the proper demographic that they're looking for. You know, it's because any landlord can say no to anybody. You know, and they just say you were not this kind that we were looking for, you were not the person that we were looking for. They don't need to say why you were not.
What advice would you give to other students facing similar housing challenges?
Have a lawyer in hand, to be honest. You're gonna need it at some point, most likely.
I'd say definitely being aware of it before they came to Amsterdam, so they know that this is also something that they take on with studying in this city, and also just trying to contact and network and just spend as much time on it as possible. So just definitely not to underestimate the problem, because I think the best thing is just to prepare and know what you're going to get yourself into, because I think some of the issues sometimes is when you don't know what you're getting into, then you've already made a big commitment to something, and then you have to sort of try to just figure it out with the housing, which I think is also hard when you have short-term contracts. You have to move around a lot when you're committed to like a 3-year bachelor's.
Have you sought assistance or support from student organizations or housing advocacy groups?
About housing?
Yeah.
Have I? No.
I did not. At the end, I ended up going to room.nl, was looking for it, and I saw the waiting list was around a year or two. So that discourages you a lot.
I never did, because I never like knew. Like now you're saying this, I'm like, why didn't I? But it's like I didn't even know that was like a thing. And also like I think also part of the reason why I didn't really look so much is like UFA has like a student housing office. But like hell, they're gonna help you. You know what I mean? Because it's like you and everybody else in Amsterdam's International trying to get a house, and so they're not gonna be able to help you because like they don't have houses. Like what you need is someone who has a bunch of houses or knows a bunch of rooms, but no one's got that knowledge. You know, no one has those connections aside from just if you're lucky and you got a friend.
Are there specific challenges or barriers you've encountered in your efforts to improve student housing options?
So I think the biggest barrier about the housing crisis that it sometimes feels like you're talking to a wall, because it's such a big systemic problem that you can advocate for more student housing with like all these different parties, but in the end they don't really have the power to change the system that led to this, especially in Amsterdam. The municipality of Amsterdam cannot fix the Dutch housing crisis. That really has to happen on a national level. So that was our biggest limit. But next to that we also noticed that the municipality itself wasn't too keen anymore on building housing for students, because they felt like we gentrified the city and international students, they thought that international students just drove up prices even more. So we noticed that it was sometimes hard to garner support for it on a political level.
How can local governments, universities and the private sector collaborate to alleviate the student housing shortage?
So the problem with this question is that I don't believe that the private sector is the one who can help us out of here. I think we have to look at different modes of ownership. I think we have to invest more in housing corporations and social housing. And I think that the municipality and the universities have to get together and clearly take responsibility for the policy that they have formulated over the last 2 years. For instance, the University of Amsterdam has grown a lot. They've attracted a lot of international students. and therefore I think they should take responsibility for all the students that they brought in. And they have then to tell an honest story about this to the municipality. And I think also the municipality has to deal with the fact that Amsterdam is, in the end, a city, a student city, and you know, students can't really live on the countryside because that's not where the university is. So I think the city has to be sharper in the fact that the city is just a place for young people and for students. That also means accommodating for them in terms of housing.
What strategies do you believe are the most effective in creating more affordable and accessible student housing options?
What I think in terms of strategies is very important. That's also sometimes a weakness and something that I have to deal with myself. Is that we have to be stand in solidarity with other groups who also face this housing crisis. We shouldn't look at short-term solutions that harm other groups. We really have to look at the bigger picture and the systemic issues that lie on the basis of this crisis. And that doesn't mean just voting, it also means going out there, taking action, going to protests or other forms of direct action like squatting, and showing the world and politics that this system just doesn't hold anymore. And I think talking and lobbying is also very important, but that doesn't get you to the big changes that you need in the system.
Do you think the situation will get better?
I have no idea. Right now, like in the near future, I don't think so, because it doesn't seem like anyone cares enough to make a change. Even like the government or the landlord or the university, like anyone, it doesn't feel like it. And but I hope so. I mean, eventually you're gonna have to, I don't know, build houses, I guess.
Good question. I hope so. Had you asked me 2 days ago, I would have said it will get better definitely in the very near future. But we just had elections yesterday, and there are some things that I did not see coming. Some of the results I was personally I wouldn't have wished were realized. But all of the parties that I think I've been able to look into do have some strategy to build more housing, renovate more housing, make housing a bit cheaper. So I think it will get better, definitively. However, I was hoping on more radical and pretty much direct change.
I don't think that they will in any way actually make sure that houses become more affordable. There will be tax reforms, and as long as Holland is a right-wing country, which it always really has been and probably will be in the future, I don't see any tax reform or subsidies or any actual government action in this area.
What changes or solutions would you like to see implemented to address this crisis?
See, that's the issue. We are in a situation where the only way to do it is to remodel a lot of buildings and make them as accessible as possible, make more buildings where you don't need these contracts, make the university be able to hold student housing like the actual university and not through these like housing agencies where it's only limited to 1 year. As well, where are they gonna make it? Where are they gonna build the buildings? You know, like there's no space. You know, and the Amsterdam is trying to expand as much as possible, but it is really limited amount of things that they can do. So if there's a solution to it, it would be to just make it as accessible as possible for everybody to get a room. But I know that's not going to be the case.
I think just maybe more support also for, like in terms of students, I would say just more support and more awareness about the situation. So I think just making sure that if a certain amount of international students are going to come to the city, just to make sure that they have the support and the housing to accommodate them in a sort of a proper environment for new students.
If you could speak directly to the political actors involved to address the current housing crisis, what would you say?
Fuck you guys. Nah, I mean, like you can change it. It's not so hard, but I also see the position that they're in. Like it's kind of, you know, international students are not like on the highest priority of people in this country that they're looking out for and caring for. Because like, you know, before it was like a housing crisis for international students, it was like a housing crisis for Dutch people who were here. And so I think they also definitely see it as like, it was already hard for Dutch people who were living here, and then now you're letting in a bunch of these like kids who are also taking up a bunch of housing. But I think it should not be looked at in that way, where it doesn't matter who's living in the houses. You can structure it in a way where anybody who is here could get a house more easily. Like you could make it, I think registration is a big one, and also the home sharing, like that's a whole big thing. Like some houses you can't rent if you're like, you know, like Leo or I, like you just can't rent them because you're not allowed to have a split rent thing. Like you gotta be a couple, you gotta be like you know, all kinds of people like pretend they're couples to get houses. Like I almost appreciated when they would say no internationals, no students, because when they would say no home shares, it's like who do you think is going to be home sharing? It's like at least just come out and say you don't want students internationals. When they're like no home sharers is such like a fucked up way to call this.
I have the privilege to live nearby the UvA, like 1 hour. It's been 1 hour is fine by me now. Some people are stressing out, 1 hour, that's so far. No, it's fine. But I get the frustration and the stress that it takes for the international people or people who live farther away from me, because if you have class at 9, it's ridiculous to stand up at 6 o'clock to be there on time. So I would say just to them, like, ask the students, like, don't talk with your adult friends, or ask the students, like the people who are in this situation, how do you want to see it? How do you want to see it changed? What are your solutions? Maybe they come up with a clever idea. People are smart, people are studying. Maybe they learn something in their study that they want to implement, so people from every country in the world and even in the Netherlands can live nearby their place where they can study.
Stop focusing on getting more people a mortgage, because that's not going to build us more houses, that's just going to drive up prices. So get rid of the hypotheekrenteaftrek. And also dare to invest in social housing. It's not weird to spend money on it. We actually did that for a very long time in the Netherlands, and that's what made housing so affordable and so great. So I would do that. Stop listening to private investors.
If you could sum up how you feel about the housing crisis in one word, what would that one word be?
Irritating.
Hopeless.
Chaos.
Devastating.
Chaotic.
Disappointed.
We are getting scammed.
Crap.
Disempowering. Yeah.
A conveyor belt. It's, you try your best to, like, influence it, but your path is already set out by local politicians, but also national politicians, but also things that people can't control. So it is your job to run against the way the conveyor belt is going.